So this video here is on how to put different types of discs that I've got here onto the grinder. It's a common question that I get asked. So when you pick the grinder up, it's got this button on the back here, and if you push that button in with your finger while you're holding it, so I'm holding it in with my finger on the back there, it actually locks the shaft and stops the shaft from turning. So the first thing you want to do when you put a grinding disc on is get a backing nut. Now the backing nut has got a bit of a square cavity on the back of that nut, and there's a square shoulder on the actual spindle, so that nut has to go on first, and then you can put any disc on that actually suits this bore here. So there's a shoulder that sticks up slightly, and if I take this disc, the internal hole size of that disc is 22 millimeters, and the shoulder is slightly less than that, so that goes on next. And then we have a top nut that goes on, and it's got a shoulder that's actually going to drop down into there, so we just put that on there. I'm still holding my finger on the other side on the button, and all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull the disc tight with my hand. That's all you need to do. They make spanners that go with these for putting discs on, but you don't need to use them. The only time you need to use the spanner is if actually the grinder grabs and it pulls the discs on really tight. So when you're grinding with the grinder, the rotation of the grinder means that the nut is going to try and tighten. There's no way it can come off. So if you do it up by hand at the start, when you need to change it, you can also just take it off by hand, and it's easy to get off. So as I say, do it up by hand, just grab it, pinch it tight with your hand, and take your finger off the button on the back. Just give it once you've taken your finger off the back, just give it a turn to make sure that you've disengaged the lock. I started a grinder once when I was young, and the lock was still engaged, and I stripped the lock clean out of the grinder. It was completely stuffed after that. So that's for putting on a grinding disc. If you want to put on a sanding disc, what you need is a backing pad for the sanding disc. So you're going to take both nuts off the grinder, and you put the backing pad on first, then you put your sanding pad on the top, and then you've got this tapered nut that goes on the top of that. Once again, put your finger on the lock on the underside, which I've got, and I'm just doing it up finger tight, so that when I come along I can simply undo it by by hand later. If it does lock on because it's grabbed when you're grinding something, you will have to use the spanner. The two prongs on the spanner fit into prongs on the nut. That nut has got some different spaced holes so that you can use different spanners. This one has just got 4 holes on it, and they just simply lock into the surface, so you can actually rotate the nut off the surface. So you can do that. If you get a disc that, or you've got a disc that's locked on there for a standard grinding disc, and you've got the wrong size spanner, what you can do, so I've done it up by hand, just imagine that it's locked up tight, and I've got a spanner here with the prongs and they don't fit into these holes. You can put the one prong into one side of the hole and push the other prong up against the edge of the actual wheel instead of into the holes, and it will actually undo it for you. So that's one way of doing it. The crucial thing here when you're doing different types of wheels, that if you're using the cut-off discs, the discs we here use at ARA are 1 millimeters thick, and they have to be perfectly sandwiched. That shoulder drops into this cavity here, and they are absolutely sandwiched together. So if I take the disc out and I push the nuts together, there's about a ½ millimeter gap, which is enough to grab. The crucial point is that you don't have the shoulder upside down on the outside surface. It has to go into the recess. So nut onto there, sitting on the square shoulder, finger on the button, and nut onto the top. And just do it up. And you shouldn't be able to actually turn that disc between the nuts. It's got to be tight. So that's a quick video on how to put different types of nuts onto the grinder. Watch it a few times, get used to it. Thank you.